Hey, welcome to CSC 102, Intro to Technology. We'll be doing our first exercise after the Word intro, which was basically just setting up your defaults in Word and getting familiar with your interface in Word. We're going to actually start the letter now, and we had just started that, and this is a PDF file that you can open up in Acrobat Reader if you download it, or you may get it in class. And basically it has some instructions on it, not really instructions, but just some notes that indicate certain parts of a business letter, which you may not be familiar with, and it's good to be familiar with. Even if you've done many letters, you probably forget this. So it has things like the return address, that comes first. If you ever forget that the return address comes first, just remember that, if this was letterhead, you would have your address on the letterhead first before you addressed it to anybody else. So it's the return address. Then we're going to put a date on here, and we're just going to put any date on here. It doesn't matter because we'll be doing these in different semesters. So I just happen to randomly put September 21st, 2016 on there. And it also mentions we're putting two returns. Basically, two returns means you're hitting enter twice and you're putting an extra space in between. Eventually, we'll use space before and space after for that. We have our inside address here, which is actually 5 lines. Then we have two returns in between, hitting 3 returns, but 2 in between. And then there's our greeting or a salutation. We have the body of our letter. And then we also have kind of our closing, which has sincerely or whatever you'd want to put there. We're going to put in a signature as an image in there as well, just so you get familiar with doing that. And then just your name that's actually going to be typed out. I have the different parts of the business letter down here on the bottom part of the document. And I also have marked the margins on here. We're going to be using the 1 1/4 on the sides and the 1 inch on the top, which is actually the Office 2003 default, which we started off initially. So this is kind of the finished product, and I'll also show you, and by the way, I'm on a Mac version right now of 2016, and this is kind of the finished product of what it looks like. And I'll just put our Warren County address in here. But we're going to use this. We're going to use kind of like we're sending a letter out to a university, to Rutgers. And this is going to be our inside address, our greeting, and we're going to do it just like this. So we're going to set this up. And then we're also going to make a little envelope so that if we send it out, we have a professional looking envelope with our return address that we could print out, because you don't want to be like handwriting an envelope. So we're going to set this up in Word, and I'm going to do this over on the Windows side. So I'm going to skip over to the Windows side right now. And now I'm actually in Windows, and this is kind of where we started off on the first part of the Word intro part. And I'm not going to have, record typing all this, but this is basically the first 2 lines. Every time I hit a return or hit my enter key, it's putting this marker here, and that's on the show hide button. So I'm going to type here, I'm going to put my address, and I'll just type this, Washington, New Jersey. And remember, we want to put a capital NJ. And then I'll put a space. Sometimes people put 2 spaces for the zip code, and I'm going to put 087882. I think that's it. And then I'll also put my phone number, and I'll put 908-835. I'll put my office number, 2372, I think. And I can also put a email, and I could label it email, or I could just put homa@warren.edu. People will know that's an email when they see that. Sometimes when you hit return, it does it. And there you can see it showing up with a hyperlink. And this is what I mean. I hit 1 return, and I'm going to say return because on Mac we call, there's actually return key. And these are carriage returns. The old term was carriage returns. So I'm going to hit 2 here so there's an extra space. But if you didn't want the hyperlink here, you could right click and go edit hyperlink. And you could basically turn that off. You could just say remove link. That way it doesn't show up with the underline. Unless you're going to send that digitally, you might want to leave it in there. So this is the first part of this. The next part I'm going to do here on my letter is actually going to be the date. So what I'm going to do is use insert date, and I'm going to go to the insert tab. And way over here on the right side, they have insert date and time. And you could choose the type, and I'm not going to put the day on here. I'm just going to put, and right now as I'm recording this, it's actually August 28th. So I guess I'll use that, but you could use whatever you want. So I'll hit OK. And that's today's date. And I'm not going to move it over yet. We're going to actually set a tab so that we can move over everything as we want. You could also use indents, but we're going to set a tab so we know how to set a tab. Now, what I'm going to do next is hit return twice again, or hit enter twice. So that's why it says 2 returns on the on the sample. So I'll hit return and return again. And then I'm going to start typing the inside address, which is Office of University. Okay, I just typed that in, and those are my 5 lines. Now I'm going to hit 3 returns, 1, 2, 3, and that'll put 2 extra kind of spaces in between. And then I'm just going to put attention, and I'll just put ATTN with a colon, and I'll put undergraduate. So I'll just put attention undergraduate program director, and I'll just hit double returns again. And then I'm going to type the body of the letter, which starts with please accept my application. And I typically won't have students type a lot in this class, but just for now it's not bad to make sure that you're typing things correctly so that you know how to spell check and that you know how to get the information correct. So I'm going to put in the rest of the letter here, including my closing at the bottom. So I'm going to do that now, and you don't have to watch that. And let me pause and I'll finish that up. Okay, I typed all of my letter here, and one thing I'm going to do while I'm in here is I'm going to set a tab. Now you can, and all that we're going to do is we're going to move over our date and move over our closing information. Now what we can, there's different ways to do this, but what we're going to do is we're going to highlight everything. I'm going to put my cursor in here and do Control A and highlight everything. Control A is select all, and then we're going to go back to our Home tab. We're going to open up our paragraph settings launcher. And remember, this is where we set our default to be 0, so we didn't have any space after or anything like that. And we're going to go down here into tabs, this bottom thing down here. If you've never set a tab before, this is one place where you can do it. I'm going to click on tabs, and I'm just going to put in 3.5. And I'm going to do it up here, in this area up here. And when you do that, it's going to be a left tab by default, and it's not going to have any leader. We'll talk more about them later, but right now 3.5 is fine, but get in the habit of hitting the set button before you hit OK. And that means there's your tab. That means it's set, and it's a left tab, and it has no leader. And don't worry about these default tabs over here. That's set to 0.5, and they're usually always set to 0.5. That means whenever you hit the tab key, it's going to tab over ½ an inch. But we're not going to do anything with the default. We're setting a custom tab stop right here. And once we hit set, we're good. So I'm going to hit OK. And when I do that, notice nothing happens. Nothing happens when you set a tab. It's actually showing up here on my ruler. It's actually a tab stop. And what that means is when I hit the tab key, it's going to move there. Okay, so nothing happens until you hit the tab key. So you have to do that. And you don't highlight and hit the tab key. You actually do this. You actually, if we're going to move the date over, you put your cursor there. You just click so you can see your blinking cursor, and you're just going to hit your tab key. And it'll bump over to 3.5. Now you could have done an indent at 3.5, but you should learn how to set a tab as well. And then down here, what we're going to do is we're going to hit tab a couple times. We're going to hit it here, and then I'm going to hit it here. I don't really have to hit it here for these returns because we're going to put an image in here, a JPEG signature. It's just a fake signature that says my signature, but we're going to put an image in here. So that's what we're going to do next. So after our last steps on the business letter, we're going to insert our signature. So the next step of doing that is going to be going to the Insert tab. But I am going to go down here, and I'll put my cursor here because that's where I want the signature to be. And it's actually a JPEG image. So I'm just going to click there, and I'm going to do Insert, and I'm going to do Insert Pictures, and they'll bring up from a file. So you're going to look for your file of where you had downloaded that from eLearning or from your myWarren. Now right now I have mine on my desktop in my folder for CSE 102. So let me go in here and find my CSE 102, my Word folder, and there it is, my signature. It's the only image showing up that you can insert. So if you don't see anything else, it's only showing pictures in here. So, and it doesn't show the JPEG on here. It's just showing it on Windows. It doesn't always show the extension. And that's the one I'm going to use. So I'm going to say Insert. And there it is. It's just my signature. This is just a scan, or even I think a photo I took with a phone. And you could scale this by grabbing on the corner. You want to scale it down. Now you could tab this over, but what we're going to do is when you bring this in here, and if you don't see these picture tools or format, if you don't see them, if you click out, you might not see them. You want to click on here, and it seems to be going there automatically, but you may have to double click. But if you go to text wrap, you could use position, but I prefer text wrap, and just use in front of text. What that does is it makes this graphic, and if you grab it by the edges of it, you don't want to grab it by the middle or the corners because it'll scale it. But if you grab it by the edges with this little quad arrow, you can move this into place, and you can see it's covering up my name right now. So I could either put another return in there, or I could just scale this down a little bit, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to scale it down so it fits nicely in between, and I can move it independently. And again, that was under text wrap, and it was in front of text, which makes it move independently. But then if you actually hit returns, it'll stay with the text, but it'll keep it in front, and you could kind of move it around automatically. So that's the image in there. You can also, save something as a PNG file or a GIF file so that it's transparent if you needed to for whatever reason, but that's fine. That's a JPEG right now. So that's pretty much my letter right now. That's the only thing I really have to do on here, and I'm going to save it. Now the last thing we have to do with this exercise, and we're on like step 22. It seems like there's a lot of steps, but it's really not that hard. It's fairly simple. Last thing we're going to do is we're just going to make an envelope. We're going to make a business envelope, a number 10, and we're going to highlight where we want this to be addressed to. So I'm just going to highlight this right here, and I'm going to go to mailings and over here to envelopes, and it's the same way on a Mac. It's fairly similar on a Mac, and I'm going to go to envelopes where it says create, and it'll open a window, and there it is, and it actually put my return address in there. And if it's not there, you may have to type it, but here's the address that's in there, and we're probably going to change the font. But you could see we could also do labels as well, but we're going to do an envelope, and it's actually doing a number 10. You could go to options to change the kind of envelope it is, but it usually will default to a number 10 envelope, and we could just check. We could go into options and see what it is, and it's saying size 10, 4 1/8 by 9 1/2. That's a standard business envelope that you can fold a letter with 2 folds in a letter fold and put it in there. And we're going to change the font. Now you could change the font here, or you could change it right on screen. So I'm just going to change it right on screen when we're done. So all that we have to do right now is just say add to document. Now if you're working on a Mac, the Mac version actually can make a new document of just the envelope, which is nice. And you could do that here too if you wanted to make a separate document. But right now they only give you the option to add to document, and we're going to do that. That way when you upload the document, both parts will be all together. So I'm going to say add to document, and there it is, and I'm going to change the font on this one where my return address is, and if it wasn't there you could have typed it in. I'm going to go back to my home tab and just make sure it's Calibri Light. I'm just going to make it regular Calibri, and I'll just make it 9 point, and it's like number 26 on your sheet, so that's Calibri 9 point. We'll just make it small, just like a little return address label. You don't need that very big at all. And then down here I'm actually going to make this, I'll make it Cambria since I was working in Cambria, and I'll go find Cambria again, and you could make that, it's 12 right now, you could even make it 14. I wouldn't go any bigger than that. And then even if this is, you could even move this over, or you could even move the whole thing over. If you want it over right, there's kind of a box here, and you can even just move the box over a little bit instead of worrying about any of the indents in here right now. But that looks pretty good, and that's all I want you to do. And if it's actually, notice it's getting cut off, you can stretch this out. You can stretch this box out so that this goes on one line and that goes on the one line. And if you wanted to make it like if 14 you thought was too big, you could go here and make it 13. You'd have to manually put that in, but that might be a little bit better of the 13 point. So that looks pretty good, and that's all we really have to do. Now you have a nice professional looking envelope. Be careful when you print. You want to print out the envelope on a separate page, and you want to insert the envelope into your printer and make sure it's going the right way. Usually your printer will have little icons on there, so you do it. Sometimes you have to mess around a little to get it right, but that's it. And this pretty much our first assignment right here. Just getting familiar doing a standard business letter and making an envelope. And you could turn these off to see what it looks like, and that looks nice and professional. So we have this done. That should be number 28. So we're ready to submit this, and we already went over the submitting process in myWarren. So you want to make sure that you save this, and you want to make sure that you go into your coursework in myWarren, and then you upload it correctly, and make sure you hit that little blue link when you're done, which we go over in the first part of this.